Dearest listeners, how cruel is fate when one's reputation hangs upon the actions of another. Today, your humble chronicler brings you the most extraordinary tale of redemption, justice, and a love that defied the strictest boundaries of proper society. If you find yourself captivated by this tale, do leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and express your excitement for more. But let us not rush, for the best stories, like the finest aged brandy, must be savored properly. The morning fog had not yet lifted from the streets of London when Miss Sophia Stratford received the letter that would forever alter the course of her life. Her slender fingers trembled as she broke the seal, the heavy parchment bearing the official mark of His Majesty's court. The news contained within transformed her world in an instant. Her brother, Mr. Thomas Stratford, had been formally charged with high treason against the crown. Miss Stratford stood perfectly still by the window of the modest Bloomsbury townhouse that had, until this moment, represented security and respectability. At 20 years of age, with chestnut hair that framed delicate features and eyes the color of English lavender, Sophia had been considered a promising match despite her limited fortune. The daughter of a respected scholar who had passed 2 seasons prior, she had maintained a small but dignified position in society through careful observance of propriety and the patronage of her godmother, Lady Harwick. That protection would now undoubtedly evaporate like morning dew beneath a scorching sun. Treason was not merely a crime, it was social death for an entire family. Through the drawing-room window, Sophia observed the gardener's boy delivering newspapers to neighboring homes. By afternoon, all of London would know of Thomas Stratford's alleged conspiracy with Napoleon's agents. They would whisper how he had disappeared the night before his arrest was to take place, leaving his sister to face the consequences of his betrayal. The mantel clock struck 9. Mrs. Timmins, their housekeeper of many years, entered with a tea tray, her face drawn with concern. The woman had already heard then. News of scandal traveled with remarkable efficiency among the servant class. The morning papers had arrived. Upon the silver tray lay the Times, its front page dominated by news of her brother's crimes. The bold print seemed to shout from the page, "Stratford, heir sought for treason. Documents revealing military positions discovered in French hands." Sophia did not reach for it. There would be time enough for such torment later. Instead, she composed a brief note to her godmother requesting an urgent meeting. Lady Harwick was the only person of influence who might still receive her, though even that was uncertain now. Within the hour, she was seated in Lady Harwick's elegant morning room in Grosvenor Square, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to prevent their trembling. The older woman's face was grave as she studied her goddaughter. Lady Harwick's words were softer than Sophia had expected. The evidence against Thomas was substantial. She was informed. Letters in his hand. Payments traced to French accounts. His flight suggested guilt rather powerfully. Sophia maintained that perhaps he fled from fear rather than guilt, though her voice lacked conviction. It mattered little in the eyes of society, Lady Harwick explained. The damage was done. Sophia could not remain in that house. It would likely be seized by the crown. She must consider her position most carefully. The words fell like stones. Sophia had known this would be the case, yet hearing it spoken aloud made the situation unbearably real. Lady Harwick had given this considerable thought. She could not openly maintain her connection with Sophia, not immediately. The Harwick name must remain untainted. However, she had a distant relation in Lincolnshire. The air there was said to be most beneficial for those recovering from scandal. She would arrange for Sophia to stay as a companion to Mrs. Helena Blackwood, a widow of good standing though modest means. Exile. That was what was being offered. Sophia expressed her gratitude with as much dignity as she could muster. What other choice did she have? Her small inheritance would not sustain her independently, and employment opportunities for a trader's sister would be non-existent. 4 days later, having packed what few possessions she was permitted to keep, Sophia boarded a mail coach bound for Lincolnshire. The weather matched her spirits, gray, cold, and threatening rain at any moment. As London faded behind her, she felt herself vanishing alongside it. Miss Sophia Stratford, once a respectable young lady of modest prospects, was now merely the sister of a trader, to be hidden away in the countryside until the scandal faded, if it ever would. The journey north was interminable. Fellow passengers either ignored her completely or stared with thinly veiled curiosity. Had they recognized her? Or was it merely her plain traveling costume and solitary state that drew their attention? In either case, Sophia kept her gaze fixed upon the passing landscape, finding comfort in the unchanging nature of England's green hills. At least the countryside remained indifferent to human scandal. Mrs. Blackwood's residence proved to be a small but tidy stone cottage on the outskirts of the village of Thornfield. The widow herself was neither as old nor as severe as Sophia had feared. A woman of perhaps 45, with keen eyes and a no-nonsense manner, she welcomed her new companion with neither excessive warmth nor obvious disdain, a mercy in itself. The cottage had a small garden, a modest library, and most importantly, a pianoforte. Music had been Sophia's one true solace, and the prospect of being denied this comfort had weighed heavily upon her heart during the journey. Perhaps exile would not be entirely unbearable. Life in Lincolnshire settled into a quiet routine. Mornings were devoted to household duties, assisting Mrs. Blackwood with correspondence, reading aloud from the newspapers that arrived 3 days late from London, and occasionally walking into the village for small errands. Afternoons allowed for music practice and needlework, while evenings were spent reading by the fire. It was a peaceful existence, if lacking in stimulation or joy. The first hint that her London scandal had followed her came 3 weeks after her arrival. During a visit to the village milliner, the previously friendly shopkeeper suddenly became cold and formal. The change was subtle but unmistakable. By the following day, invitations to tea with the vicar's wife and the local doctor's family were withdrawn with flimsy excuses. It was whispered throughout the drawing rooms of Thornfield that Miss Stratford was not merely a companion, but a woman of tainted blood, the sister of a man who had betrayed king and country. Her very presence was considered dangerous, as though treason might be contagious. Sophia bore this second fall from grace with outward stoicism and inward despair. Even in this remote corner of England, she would find no peace. Perhaps nowhere would ever truly welcome her again. Autumn painted the Lincolnshire countryside in hues of amber and crimson as October arrived. The morning had dawned clear and crisp, prompting Mrs. Blackwood to suggest that her companion might benefit from a longer walk than usual. The older woman's health prevented her from joining such excursions, but she seemed increasingly concerned about Sophia's pallor and diminishing spirits. The path along Thornfield's eastern boundary led to a small wooded area surrounding a clear stream, a place of particular beauty at this season. Sophia had discovered it during her 3rd week in exile and returned whenever weather permitted. Today, wrapped in her warmest spencer and bonnet, secured against the autumn breeze, she ventured further than usual, following the stream to where it widened into a small, secluded lake. The astute observer would note that Miss Stratford moved with the careful grace of one accustomed to society's scrutiny. Even in solitude, proper bearing remained her armor against a world that had turned hostile. Her gloved hands occasionally reached to gather a particularly vibrant leaf or trace the rough bark of an ancient oak, small gestures of connection to a natural world that judged her not. As she rounded the curve of the lake's northern shore, Sophia suddenly realized she was not alone. A tall figure stood at the water's edge, his back to her, seemingly absorbed in thought. His greatcoat and the fine breeding of the horse tethered nearby marked him as a gentleman, precisely the sort of encounter a disgraced young woman should avoid. Proper etiquette demanded she retreat unnoticed. Yet as she took a step backward, the crack of a twig beneath her boot caused the stranger to turn. Lord Gabriel Pembroke had not intended to stop at the lake. His journey from Lincoln Assizes to his country estate should have been direct, but the beauty of the morning had tempted him to a brief detour. At 34, with the responsibilities of both his judicial position and his family estates weighing upon him, such moments of solitary contemplation were increasingly rare. The sound of someone approaching drew him from his thoughts. The young woman who stood at the edge of the trees appeared as startled as he felt. Her simple but elegant attire suggested gentility, while her solitary state was unusual for a lady of breeding. Something in her expression, a wariness beyond ordinary propriety, stirred his curiosity. Their eyes met across the distance. Sophia felt a jolt of recognition, though she was certain they had never been introduced. This was no country squire or local gentleman. The aristocratic lines of his face, the authoritative set of his shoulders, and the penetrating intelligence in his dark eyes marked him as a man of significant standing. For a moment, neither moved. Then, as propriety dictated, Sophia inclined her head in the barest acknowledgement before turning to leave. A lady alone could not engage with an unknown gentleman, regardless of his apparent respectability. Lord Pembroke, however, was struck by something in the young woman's countenance, a proud dignity at odds with her evident desire to escape notice. Before she could disappear among the trees, he called out a polite greeting, introducing himself as a traveler, admiring the scenery, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The name Pembroke resonated immediately in Sophia's mind. Lord Gabriel Pembroke, the King's Justice for the Northern Circuit, the very man who would preside over her brother's trial should Thomas ever be captured. The irony of fate struck her with such force that she nearly stumbled. Protocol demanded she provide her name in return. For a heartbeat, Sophia considered offering a false identity. Yet something, perhaps fatigue from months of pretense, compelled honesty. With quiet dignity, she introduced herself as Miss Sophia Stratford, currently residing as companion to Mrs. Blackwood of Thornfield Cottage. The effect of her name was immediate, though subtle. A flicker of recognition crossed Lord Pembroke's features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. Of course he would know the name Stratford. Every official of the Crown would be familiar with the case of Thomas Stratford, traitor to England. Surprisingly, no immediate coldness followed his recognition. Instead, Lord Pembroke remarked upon the beauty of the autumn foliage with perfect civility. His manner was neither overly familiar nor coldly dismissive, a courtesy Sophia had almost forgotten existed. Their exchange was brief and entirely proper. Weather, the local landscape, and the fine condition of his lordship's horse provided safe topics that required no personal revelations. Throughout, Sophia maintained the precise distance demanded by propriety, while Lord Pembroke demonstrated the easy manners of one born to privilege yet uncorrupted by it. As their paths diverged, he to his waiting mount and she back toward the village, Sophia found herself puzzled by the encounter. It had been months since any person of quality had addressed her with genuine respect. That it should come from the very man tasked with upholding the law her brother had allegedly betrayed seemed a peculiar twist of providence. Fortune, it seemed, had a curious sense of humor. Lord Pembroke's thoughts as he continued his journey were equally unsettled. The young woman by the lake bore little resemblance to the description he had formed of Thomas Stratford's family. Reports had suggested connections to radical elements, sympathizers with the French cause. Yet Miss Stratford had shown neither the obsequious manner of the guilty-seeking favor nor the defiant air of the revolutionary. Instead, he had observed dignity in reduced circumstances, a quality he had always respected. Most curious of all was her honesty in providing her true name. She must have known who he was, what position he held. That she would not hide behind falsehood spoke to a character at odds with her brother's alleged crimes. The question lingered in his mind as his horse carried him toward Pembroke Manor. How could the same family produce both a traitor and a young woman of such evident principle? Society in rural Lincolnshire operated on different principles than London's ton, but its essential nature remained the same. Within a fortnight of their chance meeting, word had spread throughout the county that Lord Pembroke had returned to his ancestral estate. His position as both substantial landowner and respected jurist made him the most significant gentleman in the region. For Sophia, the news held little relevance. Her world had contracted to the boundaries of Mrs. Blackwood's cottage and garden, with occasional necessary visits to the village. The society that eagerly anticipated his lordship's appearance at the upcoming Michaelmas Assembly was one from which she was permanently excluded. Mrs. Blackwood, however, maintained connections through correspondence with several prominent ladies of the neighborhood. It was through one such letter that she learned Lord Pembroke had made inquiries about her companion. The information was relayed to Sophia as she arranged flowers in the small sitting room, causing her hands to still momentarily before resuming their task with deliberate care. His lordship's interest appeared to be of an official nature, Mrs. Blackwood explained. Questions regarding Miss Stratford's arrival in Lincolnshire, her conduct since, and whether she maintained correspondence with unknown parties. The widow had provided truthful, if limited, responses, assuring Sophia that nothing in her answers could cause additional distress. Sophia expressed gratitude for her employer's discretion, though inwardly a sense of resignation settled over her. Of course, a king's justice would investigate a connection to his most sought-after fugitive. The brief moment of normal human interaction by the lake had been an anomaly, nothing more. 3 days later, an invitation arrived that defied all expectation. Mrs. Blackwood and her companion were requested to take tea at Pembroke Manor the following afternoon. The card bore the seal of Lord Pembroke himself, the formal copperplate script offering no hint as to the purpose of such an unusual summons. Mrs. Blackwood appeared both concerned and intrigued. Such an invitation could not be refused without grave insult, yet the potential implications for her companion were troubling. Was this an official interrogation disguised as social courtesy? Or perhaps something even more concerning, a trap to draw out the fugitive Thomas Stratford through his sister? Sophia considered these possibilities with outward calm. Whatever awaited at Pembroke Manor, she would face it with dignity. Her conscience was clear regarding her brother's activities. If Lord Pembroke sought information she did not possess, that would soon become evident. The journey to the manor required hiring the village's only available carriage, a somewhat shabby conveyance that nonetheless delivered them to the impressive entrance of Pembroke Manor precisely at the appointed hour. The house stood as a testament to generations of wealth and good taste. Neither ostentatious nor overly grand, but undeniably impressive with its Georgian symmetry and well-maintained grounds. A properly solemn butler admitted them to a drawing room where autumn sunlight streamed through tall windows. The room was elegant yet comfortable, with furnishings that spoke of inherited quality rather than passing fashion. Lord Pembroke received them with perfect courtesy, rising from his desk as they were announced. Up close, in the full light of day, Sophia could observe what the chance meeting by the lake had only suggested. His lordship was a man in his prime, with features that combined aristocratic refinement with unexpected warmth. The lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of a capacity for humor that his serious profession might rarely allow to surface. Tea was served by an efficient housekeeper, the ritual of polite refreshment observed with precision. Throughout, conversation remained on safe, impersonal topics: the unusually fine weather, the local harvest prospects, Mrs. Blackwood's distant connection to the previous owner of a neighboring property. It was only after the tea things had been removed that Lord Pembroke addressed the true purpose of their visit. With careful courtesy, he explained that his position required him to investigate all matters connected to the Stratford case. However, his inquiries had satisfied him that Miss Stratford herself was in no way implicated in her brother's alleged crimes. More surprisingly, he expressed concern about her current situation. News had reached him of her treatment in the village. Such ostracism, he observed, represented a punishment without trial, contrary to the principles of English justice he had sworn to uphold. Sophia maintained her composure with effort. To have her private humiliations acknowledged by this man of all people was almost unbearable. Yet his manner held no pity, only a measured sense of injustice that matched her own carefully suppressed feelings. What followed was even more unexpected. Lord Pembroke explained that his widowed sister, Lady Helena Montague, was arriving from London within the week. She would be hosting several small gatherings during her stay, and had expressed a wish to make Mrs. Blackwood's acquaintance and that of her companion. The implication was clear. Through this connection to his sister, Lord Pembroke was offering Sophia a chance at limited social rehabilitation, not a complete restoration. Nothing could accomplish that while her brother remained accused of treason, but a respite from complete isolation. Mrs. Blackwood, after a moment of stunned silence, accepted with appropriate gratitude. Sophia remained quiet, her thoughts in turmoil. Why would a man in Lord Pembroke's position extend such unexpected kindness? Was it truly concern for justice, as he claimed? Or did he have some hidden motive connected to her brother's case? As they prepared to depart, Lord Pembroke addressed Sophia directly for the first time since their formal introductions. His dark eyes held hers with unsettling directness as he expressed hope that she would not allow pride to prevent her from accepting his sister's hospitality. The English legal tradition, he reminded her, presumed innocence rather than guilt. Perhaps society would do well to remember the same principle. The carriage ride back to the cottage passed in thoughtful silence. Sophia gazed out at the autumn landscape, considering the extraordinary turn events had taken. Lord Pembroke had offered neither pity nor condemnation, merely recognition of an injustice and a measured attempt to address it. Such unexpected fairness from the very embodiment of the system that had condemned her family left her profoundly unsettled. One must confess that when Providence takes unexpected turns, even the most skeptical heart may begin to hope again. For Miss Sophia Stratford, that dangerous emotion had been firmly suppressed for months. Yet as Pembroke Manor receded in the distance, a tiny spark rekindled in the carefully guarded chambers of her heart. Lady Helena Montague proved to be everything her brother was not: vivacious, forthright, and utterly unconcerned with conventional opinion. A widow of 30, with a comfortable independence, she occupied a position in society that allowed certain freedoms denied to unmarried ladies or dependent relations. Her arrival at Pembroke Manor brought new life to the stately home, and by extension, to the somewhat staid local society. The small musical evening to which Mrs. Blackwood and Sophia were invited marked their first appearance in neighborhood society. Sophia approached the occasion with trepidation, carefully concealed beneath her best evening gown, a modest creation of pale blue silk saved from her London days. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned her hair, aware that this evening represented either a moment of healing or a new humiliation. Pembroke Manor's music room was ideally proportioned for intimate gatherings, its acoustics designed to showcase the magnificent pianoforte that occupied the center of the room. Approximately 20 guests were already present when Sophia and Mrs. Blackwood were announced, their reception varying from polite nods to outright curiosity. Lady Helena, however, greeted them with genuine warmth, drawing them immediately into conversation with several other guests, as though their presence was both expected and welcome. Her manner was so natural that initial awkwardness quickly dissolved, allowing Sophia to observe the gathering with increasing calm. Lord Pembroke stood somewhat apart, engaged in conversation with the local magistrate. His formal evening attire emphasized his impressive height and the natural authority of his bearing. When his eyes briefly met Sophia's across the room, his slight nod of acknowledgement was properly reserved yet somehow reassuring. The evening progressed with various guests displaying their musical accomplishments. When Lady Helena discovered Sophia's musical background, her immediate insistence that Miss Stratford favor them with a performance created a moment of silent tension in the room. Playing would draw attention Sophia had carefully avoided. Refusing would appear ungrateful for the inclusion she had been offered. With quiet dignity, Sophia took her place at the instrument. Her selection, a moving Beethoven sonata rather than the simpler pieces favored by young ladies seeking to display pretty fingers, revealed both technical skill and emotional depth. As her fingers moved across the keys, the room faded from her awareness, the music providing a rare moment of complete freedom from the constraints that had bound her since her brother's disgrace. When the final notes faded, the silence that followed was broken by sincere appreciation from the assembled company. Even those who had initially regarded her with suspicion found themselves moved by the performance. Music, that most universal of languages, had spoken where words would have failed. It was during the refreshments that followed when Lord Pembroke approached her, offering a cup of negus with proper formality. His observation that her musical interpretation showed unusual understanding of the composer's intentions was delivered in the same measured tones he might use in court. Yet Sophia detected genuine appreciation beneath the formal words. Their conversation, necessarily brief and conducted under the interested gaze of several observers, revealed surprising common ground. Both shared an appreciation for the newer, more emotional compositions emerging from the continent, despite the political tensions with France. Lord Pembroke's knowledge of music proved both extensive and thoughtful, suggesting a depth beyond his public persona as jurist and landowner. As the evening concluded, several of the local gentry who had previously cut Sophia in the village shops now offered polite farewells. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Lady Helena's acceptance, and by extension, Lord Pembroke's tacit approval, had created a small space in which Sophia might exist as something more than merely a traitor's sister. The following weeks brought a gradual shift in Sophia's circumstances. Invitations to Lady Helena's small gatherings continued, each acceptance making the next slightly easier. Limited connections with selected neighbors developed, primarily those whose judgment was influenced by Lord Pembroke's example rather than general gossip. Throughout this cautious social rehabilitation, his lordship maintained a careful distance. Their interactions were invariably proper, limited to brief conversations during gatherings where others were always present. Yet Sophia increasingly found his gaze following her movements, his attention caught by her observations during general discussions. For his part, Lord Pembroke found himself increasingly intrigued by Miss Stratford's combination of resilience and sensitivity. Her situation would have broken many young women of her background. Instead, she had adapted with quiet dignity, neither seeking pity nor displaying bitterness. During one particularly engaging discussion of poetry at his sister's literary afternoon, her insightful comments on Wordsworth's natural imagery revealed both intelligence and an authentic appreciation for beauty that pretentious society misses often lacked. As November's chill descended upon Lincolnshire, an invitation of a different sort arrived at Thornfield Cottage. Lady Helena requested Mrs. Blackwood and Miss Stratford's assistance with preparations for the annual Christmas charity baskets distributed to tenants of the Pembroke estate. The project would require regular visits to the manor over several weeks, a significant increase in their previous limited social interaction. Mrs. Blackwood's rheumatism had worsened with the approaching winter, making the journey to Pembroke Manor increasingly difficult. After some discussion, an arrangement was made whereby Sophia would represent them both, traveling to the manor 3 afternoons each week in the Pembroke carriage sent specifically for this purpose. Thus began a period of quiet transformation. The library at Pembroke Manor was designated as the center for the charity preparations, its large tables ideal for organizing and wrapping the various household goods, preserved foods, and small luxuries that would comprise each basket. Under Lady Helena's energetic direction, several neighborhood ladies gathered regularly to assist with the preparations. It was during these afternoons that Sophia gradually rediscovered parts of herself long suppressed by scandal and isolation. Her organizational abilities and practical suggestions earned genuine appreciation from the other volunteers. Small conversations over shared tasks slowly rebuilt her confidence in social interactions. Lord Pembroke's involvement in these sessions was limited by his judicial duties, which frequently took him to Lincoln, or even as far as York during this busy legal term. Yet on the occasions when he was present at the manor, he invariably found reason to visit the library, ostensibly to consult a particular volume or to bring his sister some household matter requiring her attention. During one such visit, he discovered Sophia alone in the library, carefully recording the contents of each completed basket in a ledger. The late afternoon sunlight illuminated her profile as she worked, highlighting the graceful curve of her neck bent over the pages and the remarkable concentration in her expression. For a moment he observed her unnoticed, struck by the realization that he had come to look forward to these glimpses of Miss Stratford with an eagerness that extended beyond mere curiosity about her brother's case. There was something about her presence that brought a sense of harmony to rooms she occupied, a quality of attention she gave to both people and tasks that he found increasingly compelling. Sophia, becoming aware of his presence, rose with a start. Finding herself alone with Lord Pembroke, even in the perfectly proper setting of his family's library, created a moment of uncertainty. Their previous interactions had always occurred within the safer context of group gatherings. His lordship, however, maintained perfect propriety while reducing the awkwardness of the moment. With formal courtesy, he inquired about the progress of the charity preparations, expressing appreciation for her assistance to his sister. As they discussed the project, standing at the proper distance with the substantial library table between them, Sophia was struck by the genuine interest he showed in ensuring the comfort of those dependent upon the estate. Their conversation gradually shifted to the books surrounding them. A shared appreciation for literature emerged as Lord Pembroke described the collection's history, pointing out volumes collected by generations of his family. When Sophia mentioned her father's scholarly background and the small but carefully curated library she had grown up with, Genuine regret crossed his lordship's features at the mention of what she had lost along with her home. It was the first time either had directly acknowledged her reduced circumstances. The moment might have turned uncomfortable, yet Lord Pembroke's response held no pity, only recognition of the value of what had been taken from her. In that brief exchange lay the seeds of a deeper understanding. Both recognized that loss of material possessions often matters less than the loss of heritage, connection, and identity that accompanies such changes. As twilight gathered outside the tall library windows, Lady Helena returned with several other ladies. The private moment ended, yet something had shifted between them, a recognition of shared values that transcended their vastly different social positions and the legal gulf created by her brother's alleged crimes. Later, as the Pembroke carriage returned her to Thornfield Cottage, through the gathering darkness, Sophia found herself contemplating the enigma of Lord Gabriel Pembroke. The man who represented the very system that had condemned her family had somehow become the architect of her limited social redemption. His courtesy extended beyond mere politeness into a realm of genuine respect she had not experienced since her brother's flight. More disturbing still were her own feelings. Despite every reason for resentment or suspicion, she found herself drawn to his integrity, his measured kindness, and the intelligence that informed his every action. Such attraction was not merely inappropriate, it was potentially dangerous to her already vulnerable heart. December arrived with bitter winds and occasional snow flurries that transformed the Lincolnshire landscape into a world of stark beauty. Preparations for the Christmas season occupied most households, and Pembroke Manor was no exception. Lady Helena's enthusiasm for the holiday had inspired plans for a modest Christmas Eve gathering, larger than her usual entertainments, but still limited to select neighbors and connections. The invitation to this event caused considerable discussion between Mrs. Blackwood and Sophia. Attending would represent Sophia's most public appearance since her arrival in Lincolnshire. While Lady Helena's smaller gatherings had provided limited social rehabilitation, this Christmas celebration would include several prominent families who had not yet encountered the disgraced Miss Stratford. After careful consideration, Mrs. Blackwood decided they should accept. Her rheumatism had improved enough to allow the journey, and she was increasingly convinced that Lord Pembroke's family connection offered Sophia the best hope for eventual reintegration into respectable society. Limited though that might be, the night of the gathering arrived with perfect winter weather, cold but clear, with stars brilliant against the dark sky and a nearly full moon illuminating the snow-covered landscape. Sophia wore her best evening gown, a deep green velvet that had been carefully altered to reflect current fashion as much as possible. Mrs. Blackwood had insisted on lending a modest pearl pendant for the occasion, adding a touch of elegance to the otherwise simple ensemble. Pembroke Manor had been transformed for the season. Evergreen boughs decorated with red ribbons adorned the entrance hall, their fresh scent mingling with beeswax candles and mulled wine. The drawing room sparkled with additional candles, while a modest orchestra had been arranged in the adjoining music room to provide entertainment throughout the evening. Lady Helena greeted them with characteristic warmth, immediately introducing them to several guests who had not attended her previous gatherings. Lord Pembroke, occupied with a group of gentlemen near the fireplace, acknowledged their arrival with a polite bow from across the room. The evening progressed pleasantly at first. Sophia found herself engaged in conversation with the vicar's wife and several other local ladies who, following Lady Helena's example, showed cautious acceptance. The music provided natural pauses and shifts in company, allowing her to navigate the gathering without experiencing direct cuts or obvious slights. It was during one such musical interlude that Sophia overheard a conversation not intended for her ears. Two elegantly dressed ladies had positioned themselves behind a large arrangement of evergreens, apparently unaware that she stood on the other side, partially concealed by the greenery as she examined a collection of miniatures displayed on a side table. Their topic was Lord Pembroke and his unusual interest in the Stratford case. The older woman expressed concern about his lordship's reputation, suggesting that his association with the traitor's sister showed questionable judgment. Her companion responded with a more malicious interpretation. Perhaps Lord Pembroke maintained the connection to extract information about the fugitive's whereabouts. The conversation continued with speculation that Miss Stratford might be aware of her brother's location all along, possibly even in communication with him. Why else would a man of Lord Pembroke's position extend such unprecedented social courtesy to a young woman from a disgraced family? Sophia remained perfectly still, her face composed despite the painful revelations. Of course, such rumors would circulate. How naive she had been to imagine that Lord Pembroke's kindness might stem from genuine concern for justice rather than calculation. His profession, after all, was founded on strategic thinking and the careful gathering of evidence. The possibility that she had been manipulated, that every courtesy, every conversation, every seemingly genuine moment of connection had been merely a strategy to monitor her for signs of contact with Thomas, felt like a physical blow. Worse was the realization that she had begun to care deeply about a man who apparently viewed her as nothing more than a means to an end. When the musicians began another selection, Sophia moved quietly away from her inadvertent eavesdropping position. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of careful composure. She participated in conversations, accepted refreshments, and even joined in singing carols when Lady Helena organized an impromptu performance, all while maintaining a perfect facade that revealed nothing of her inner turmoil. Lord Pembroke approached her only once during the evening, inquiring with apparent concern whether she was feeling well, as she seemed somewhat pale. Sophia responded with perfect politeness that the heat of the room had perhaps affected her slightly, but she was quite well. The brief exchange, conducted under the watchful eyes of several observers, revealed nothing of the emotional chasm that had opened between them. As the evening concluded and guests began to depart, Lord Pembroke assisted Mrs. Blackwood and Sophia with their wraps, escorting them to the waiting carriage with proper courtesy. His hand briefly touched Sophia's as he handed her into the carriage, a fleeting contact that once might have caused her heart to leap, but now only deepened her sense of betrayal. The journey back to Thornfield Cottage passed in near silence. Mrs. Blackwood, tired from the evening's exertions, dozed lightly, while Sophia gazed out at the moonlit landscape, her thoughts in turmoil. By the time they arrived home, she had reached a painful decision. The following morning, Sophia composed a carefully worded note to Lady Helena, expressing gratitude for her kindness while regretfully declining any future invitations due to Mrs. Blackwood's health concerns. The explanation was plausible. The widow had indeed struggled with the late night and cold journey, yet it was merely a convenient truth masking a deeper withdrawal. Lady Helena's response arrived promptly, expressing concern for Mrs. Blackwood and offering the Pembroke carriage whenever Sophia might wish to visit independently. The genuine warmth of the note caused a moment of doubt. Had she misinterpreted the overheard conversation? Yet, the facts remained. Lord Pembroke was investigating her brother's case, and her connection to Thomas made her an object of interest regardless of her personal innocence. A week passed in quiet retreat. Sophia resumed her previous routine of limited outings and domestic occupations, declining an invitation to help distribute the Christmas baskets with the excuse of Mrs. Blackwood requiring additional care. The widow, though puzzled by this sudden withdrawal, after weeks of gradual social engagement, respected her companion's evident desire for privacy. On Christmas Eve, an unexpected delivery arrived at Thornfield Cottage. The Pembroke footman presented a beautifully bound volume of Wordsworth's poetry, with Lady Helena's compliments and wishes for a peaceful Christmas. Tucked within its pages was a brief note in a different hand, strong, decisive penmanship that Sophia immediately recognized as Lord Pembroke's. The message was simple: truth often hides beneath layers of speculation and gossip. Remember that a judge must seek evidence rather than rely on rumor. The new year brings opportunities for clearer understanding, should you wish it. Sophia stared at the note for long moments, uncertain how to interpret its cryptic message. Was this acknowledgement that he knew of the rumors? An oblique apology? Or perhaps another strategic move in whatever game he was playing? She placed the book carefully on the small table beside her bed, determined not to reread the note or seek hidden meanings in its sparse lines. Whatever Lord Pembroke's intentions, maintaining distance was the wisest course. Her heart had been wounded enough by circumstance. She would not voluntarily expose it to further pain. As snow fell softly outside her window on Christmas night, Sophia allowed herself one moment of weakness, imagining a different world where her family name carried no taint, where she might have met Lord Pembroke as an equal, where genuine affection might have grown without suspicion or ulterior motive. Such fantasies were foolish indulgences, she knew. Reality offered no such gentle possibilities. Meanwhile, at Pembroke Manor, Lord Gabriel sat alone in his study long after the household had retired. The flames flickered in the hearth as he reviewed documents related to the ongoing search for Thomas Stratford. Recent intelligence suggested the fugitive had fled to the continent, possibly Switzerland or northern Italy, far beyond English jurisdiction. More troubling were reports from his contacts in London. The evidence against Stratford had always seemed unusually perfect. Documents written in a hand remarkably like his, witnesses who appeared at precisely the right moment, financial transactions too easily traced. For a man supposedly clever enough to access sensitive military information, Thomas Stratford had left an unusually clear trail. Lord Pembroke's legal training had taught him to question evidence that appeared too convenient. Recent weeks had seen him making discreet inquiries that went beyond his official duties. Inquiries that had raised uncomfortable questions about the prosecution's case against Thomas Stratford and, by extension, about the treatment of his sister. The Christmas gathering had confirmed his growing concern. Sophia's sudden withdrawal following the event suggested she had encountered something distressing. His contacts among the guests had reported overhearing malicious speculation about his interest in the Stratford case, speculation that likely reached Miss Stratford's ears as well. The thought that she might believe he had extended kindness merely as a strategy to monitor her for connections to her brother was deeply troubling. Over recent weeks, his interest in Sophia Stratford had evolved far beyond professional concern for justice. Her dignity in adversity, her genuine nature, and the quiet strength she displayed had awakened feelings he had not experienced in years of moving through London's marriage market. Yet how could he possibly convince her of his sincere admiration when his very position made his motives suspect? The gap between them, created by both social standing and her brother's alleged crimes, seemed increasingly insurmountable. As the new year approached, both Sophia and Lord Pembroke found themselves at a crossroads where personal feelings collided with public duty and reputation. The misunderstanding between them had created a chasm that neither saw a clear way to bridge. January brought bitter weather to Lincolnshire. Heavy snow followed by freezing rain isolated Thornfield Cottage for nearly a week. The village itself cut off from larger towns as roads became impassable. For Sophia, the enforced seclusion provided unexpected opportunity. Freed from the possibility of social calls or chance encounters, she devoted herself to examining Thomas's letters more thoroughly, searching for any connection that might explain Sir Richard Blackwell's apparent interest in their family's disgrace. Her methodical review revealed a pattern previously overlooked. In the months before his alleged treason, Thomas had mentioned growing concerns about certain diplomatic communications being altered between drafting and delivery. His position at the Foreign Office had given him access to both original documents and their final versions delivered to foreign emissaries. The discrepancies, while subtle, suggested deliberate manipulation rather than clerical error. Most significant was Thomas's mention in his final letter before the scandal broke of his intention to bring these concerns to his superior, along with evidence he had quietly gathered. The superior's name was never stated explicitly, but context suggested someone recently promoted, potentially Blackwell himself. This revelation cast her brother's flight in an entirely new light. If Thomas had discovered evidence of actual treasonous activity within the Foreign Office and prepared to expose it, might someone have fabricated charges against him as preemptive discreditation? The theory seemed fantastical, yet it aligned with the fragments she had pieced together. Thomas's character as she knew it, Blackwell's sudden advancement, and Lord Pembroke's evident conflict with the official. When the thaw finally came in mid-January, it brought an unexpected visitor. Lady Helena's carriage appeared at the cottage gate one afternoon, bearing not the lady herself, but her brother. Lord Pembroke's arrival caused considerable stir in the small household, with Mrs. Timmins hurrying to prepare tea suitable for such an important guest, while Sophia attempted to compose herself for an encounter she had both dreaded and secretly anticipated. The drawing room of Thornfield Cottage seemed remarkably diminished by Lord Pembroke's presence. His tall figure and formal attire contrasted sharply with the modest furnishings, yet he displayed perfect ease as he inquired after Mrs. Blackwood's health with genuine concern. Sophia maintained careful composure, offering appropriate responses while studying him with new awareness. When the housekeeper withdrew after serving tea, an awkward silence descended. For perhaps the first time since she had known him, Lord Pembroke appeared somewhat uncertain, his usual judicial confidence temporarily absent. When he finally spoke, his words were not what she expected. He had come, he explained, to share information of a personal nature, information that might affect her view of certain matters. The careful phrasing suggested this was not an official visit, but something more complex. From his coat, he withdrew several folded documents which he placed on the small table between them. These papers, he explained, represented the results of a private investigation he had commissioned regarding her brother's case. His tone remained measured, but an unusual intensity underlay his words as he explained that certain aspects of the evidence against Thomas Stratford had troubled his legal sensibilities from the beginning. Sophia listened with increasing certainty as Lord Pembroke outlined discrepancies in witness testimonies, questionable provenance of key documents, and financial transactions that appeared to have been manufactured after the fact. His personal investigation, conducted without official sanction, suggested that Thomas Stratford might have been deliberately framed by someone with access to government offices and considerable influence. The revelation confirmed her own suspicions, yet hearing them validated by a king's justice, the very embodiment of the system that had condemned Thomas, was still overwhelming. More shocking was Lord Pembroke's next statement. His unofficial investigation had identified Sir Richard Blackwell as the likely architect of the false evidence against Thomas, the same man who had confronted him in the library at Christmas. This action placed his own position at considerable risk. By questioning the handling of a high-profile treason case and implicating a rising government official, he had potentially undermined his standing with powerful figures in government. Should his concerns be dismissed as unfounded, his judicial career would likely suffer permanent damage. Sophia finally found her voice, not to ask why he would take such a risk, but to share her own discoveries. With careful precision, she described the pattern she had identified in Thomas's letters, his growing concerns about altered diplomatic communications, his intention to report these discrepancies to a superior, and the timing of these events immediately preceding his disgrace. Lord Pembroke listened with evident surprise that gradually transformed into focused intensity. He had not known of these letters, documents that provided motive for Blackwell to silence Thomas Stratford before his own treachery could be exposed. This was the piece he had been missing: direct evidence linking Blackwell to the altered diplomatic communications that Thomas had discovered. The falsified documents against Thomas had been compelling, but establishing motive had proven elusive until now. Their conversation shifted into more substantive territory, all pretense of mere social courtesy abandoned, as they compared notes with the shared purpose of vindicating Thomas. Lord Pembroke explained that he had managed to trace several of the falsified documents back to their source, a clerk in Blackwell's office whose handwriting analysis had revealed remarkable similarities to the evidence against Thomas. What Sophia contributed was the why. Thomas had been silenced not because he possessed sensitive information to sell, but because he had discovered someone else's treachery. If the diplomatic communications had been altered to benefit Napoleon's forces, as Thomas suspected, the true traitor was the man who now pursued him most vigorously. Their exchange revealed a shared commitment to justice that transcended social boundaries and official positions. In that moment, Lord Pembroke was not a king's justice speaking to a disgraced gentlewoman, but a man of integrity collaborating with an equal in pursuit of truth. The realization of how thoroughly she had misunderstood his motives made Sophia's cheeks flush with color. Her withdrawal after Christmas must have seemed inexplicable to him, perhaps even hurtful, when in fact he had been risking his position to help her family all along. Lord Pembroke seemed to read her thoughts, addressing the unspoken tension between them directly. He had become aware, he said, that she might have overheard his confrontation with Blackwell during the Christmas gathering. With quiet intensity, he assured her that his interest in her situation had never been merely strategic or professional. Though propriety prevented him from expressing his feelings more explicitly, he hoped she might judge his character by his actions rather than by appearances or misunderstood fragments. The air between them cleared. They turned to practical matters. Thomas's letters provided crucial evidence, but bringing them forward officially would be dangerous while Blackwell maintained his position. They needed additional proof that could withstand the scrutiny of those who might prefer the original narrative of Thomas's guilt. Lord Pembroke revealed that Thomas had been located, not in Europe as widely believed, but in Scotland, living under an assumed name. Communications had been established through trusted intermediaries, but bringing him back to England remained too dangerous without stronger evidence against Blackwell. This news, that her brother was alive and within the British Isles, filled Sophia with both relief and renewed determination. After months of passive endurance, she now had the opportunity to actively contribute to clearing her family's name. What followed was a plan that would require courage from both of them. Sophia would compose a carefully worded letter to Thomas to be delivered through Lord Pembroke's trusted courier. In it, she would ask specific questions about the diplomatic communications he had discovered, details that could be verified against official records by those with proper access. Lord Pembroke, meanwhile, would return to London for the opening of the judicial term. His position gave him limited but legitimate access to certain Foreign Office archives where the original diplomatic communications might still exist. If Thomas's claims about alterations could be verified, they would have evidence directly implicating Blackwell. The risks were considerable for both. Lord Pembroke would be operating at the very edge of his authorized access, potentially facing accusations of overstepping his jurisdiction if discovered. Sophia's correspondence with Thomas, if intercepted, could be construed as aiding a fugitive. Yet the alternative, allowing an innocent man to remain in exile while the truly guilty flourished, was unacceptable to both. As they finalized their plans, a new understanding formed between them, a partnership founded on shared principles rather than social convention. Lord Pembroke departed with Thomas's letters carefully secured inside his coat, leaving Sophia both exhilarated and anxious. For the first time since her brother's disgrace, she felt herself an active participant in events rather than merely their victim. The sense of purpose transformed her outlook, bringing renewed energy to her days despite the continued winter isolation. Mrs. Blackwood, observing this change, made no direct comment, but offered quiet support by ensuring Sophia had ample private time for correspondence. Whether the widow suspected the true nature of Sophia's renewed connection with Pembroke Manor remained unclear, but her discreet assistance proved invaluable. February arrived with news that Lord Pembroke had successfully accessed the relevant diplomatic archives. His carefully worded letter, delivered by trusted messenger, confirmed that original drafts existed showing precisely the alterations Thomas had described. Changes that had benefited French interests in subtle but significant ways. More concerning was the postscript. Blackwell had apparently become aware of renewed interest in the Stratford case. Security around relevant documents had increased, and questions were being asked about Lord Pembroke's activities in London. The danger was growing, but so too was the evidence against the true traitor. Thomas's response to Sophia's letter arrived a week later, containing exactly the detailed information they needed: dates, specific wording changes, and names of diplomatic recipients who might corroborate his claims if approached discreetly. He also provided the location of a hidden journal he had maintained, documenting his growing concerns in real time. This journal, concealed in a compartment beneath a floorboard in his former London quarters, would provide contemporaneous evidence impossible to dismiss as recent fabrication. The challenge now became retrieving this journal before Blackwell's people discovered it. The Stratford townhouse had been seized by the Crown following Thomas's disgrace, but not sold. It remained under government control, occasionally used for official guests. Accessing it would require both official sanction and considerable discretion. Lord Pembroke developed a plan that demonstrated both his legal ingenuity and personal courage. As a King's Justice reviewing evidence in a case of national importance, he could request access to the property for official inspection. The request would need to be worded carefully, ostensibly to confirm certain aspects of the original case against Thomas, rather than to exonerate him. The true risk, however, would fall to Sophia. She alone knew exactly where Thomas had hidden his journal, having shared a childhood code for secret spaces in their family homes. Yet her presence during an official inspection would raise immediate suspicion. The solution they devised was both daring and potentially ruinous to her reputation. Sophia would travel to London separately, ostensibly to consult solicitors about recovering some personal items from the seized property. Lady Helena, now fully apprised of the situation by her brother, would sponsor this visit, providing both transportation and proper chaperonage to maintain appearances. While in London, Sophia would take lodgings with Lady Helena's trusted former companion, now respectably established in a small house near Russell Square. On the day of Lord Pembroke's official inspection, Sophia would appear at the Stratford townhouse by apparent coincidence, requesting permission to observe the proceedings as the property's former resident. If granted entry, a significant if, she would need to create some distraction, allowing her momentary privacy in Thomas's former study to retrieve the hidden journal. The plan contained numerous points of potential failure, not least being Blackwell's possible presence or interference. Yet it represented their best hope of obtaining evidence substantial enough to force official reconsideration of Thomas's case. A significant turning point came in early March. Lord Pembroke was summoned to a private meeting with the Lord Chief Justice in London, an unusual occurrence outside normal court sessions. The message carried a tone of urgency that suggested the matter concerned more than routine judicial business. The meeting proved both alarming and ultimately fortuitous. Certain questions had been raised, the Lord Chief Justice explained with careful neutrality, regarding Lord Pembroke's interest in the Stratford treason case. Sir Richard Blackwell had expressed concern about potential compromise of sensitive information related to national security. Lord Pembroke found himself in the precarious position of being questioned by his superior, while unable to fully explain his actions without revealing his suspicions about Blackwell. His response required perfect balance, acknowledging his review of certain aspects of the case, while presenting it as routine diligence rather than focused investigation. What saved him was the Lord Chief Justice's own subtle skepticism regarding Blackwell's rapid advancement. Without explicitly saying so, the older jurist implied that he would welcome substantive evidence addressing any irregularities in the Stratford prosecution, if such evidence existed. The conversation concluded with a warning disguised as advice. If Lord Pembroke had concerns about the case, they would need to be supported by irrefutable documentation rather than mere suspicion. This semi-official sanction, however limited, provided crucial protection. Lord Pembroke immediately wrote to Sophia, explaining that they now operated with tacit acknowledgement from the highest judicial authority, provided they could produce definitive evidence. The plans accelerated. Within a week, Sophia arrived in London under Lady Helena's sponsorship, taking up temporary residence as arranged. The familiar sights and sounds of the capital, once the backdrop to her former life, now seemed almost foreign after months in rural Lincolnshire. Yet she found herself viewing London society with new perspective, its superficial concerns and rigid hierarchies less intimidating than before her fall from grace. The day of the inspection arrived with appropriate March weather, alternating sunshine and sudden showers that mirrored the precarious nature of their undertaking. Lord Pembroke, accompanied by a clerk and a Home Office representative, thankfully not Blackwell himself, began their official examination of the Stratford townhouse precisely at 11 o'clock. Sophia arrived 30 minutes later, her appearance carefully timed to suggest coincidence rather than coordination. Her request to observe the inspection met initial resistance from the Home Office representative, but Lord Pembroke's judicial authority prevailed. His perfectly correct observation that Miss Stratford's presence might actually assist in identifying any items relevant to their investigation provided proper cover for her admission. The following hour required consummate acting from both. Lord Pembroke maintained formal distance while directing Sophia to identify various household items and explain their significance. The Home Office representative watched with evident suspicion, but could find nothing improper in their strictly professional interaction. The critical moment came when Lord Pembroke suggested examining Thomas's study more thoroughly. As the small party entered the room, Sophia deliberately misstepped, knocking over a small side table and sending papers scattering across the floor. In the momentary confusion of retrieving the scattered documents, she managed to kneel beside the precise floorboard Thomas had described, working its edge loose with practiced fingers while appearing to gather fallen papers. The journal, wrapped in oilcloth exactly as Thomas had described, slipped from its hiding place into her skirts without anyone noticing. When she rose, apologizing profusely for her clumsiness, the precious evidence was securely concealed in the special pocket she had sewn into her petticoat for this purpose. The remainder of the inspection passed without incident, concluding with formal thanks from Lord Pembroke for Miss Stratford's assistance. Their parting in the entrance hall was a masterpiece of proper behavior, a judge acknowledging a witness with perfect correctness, giving no hint of their shared purpose or growing personal connection. Only when safely returned to her temporary lodgings did Sophia allow herself to examine their prize. Thomas's journal proved even more valuable than anticipated, a detailed record spanning 6 months before his disgrace, documenting not only the altered diplomatic communications, but also veiled threats from Blackwell when Thomas had raised concerns about the discrepancies. Most damning was an entry dated the very day before charges were filed against Thomas. It described Blackwell explicitly warning him to forget what you believe you have seen, or face consequences that would destroy more than merely your career. The journal entry concluded with Thomas's written determination to gather all evidence before approaching the Foreign Secretary directly, a meeting that never occurred because the treason charges intervened. This contemporaneous documentation, combined with the original diplomatic drafts Lord Pembroke had located, created a compelling case against Blackwell. The challenge now became presenting this evidence through proper channels without alerting Blackwell himself before official action could be taken. Lord Pembroke's solution demonstrated both legal acumen and personal courage. Rather than taking the evidence directly to government officials who might have connections to Blackwell, he requested a private audience with the Lord Chief Justice, positioning the matter as a potential miscarriage of justice requiring the highest judicial oversight. The audience, granted within days, represented Lord Pembroke's greatest professional risk. Presenting evidence that contradicted an official treason finding would either establish his reputation for exceptional integrity or end his judicial career, depending on how the Lord Chief Justice responded. Sophia, meanwhile, maintained perfect social discretion, accepting Lady Helena's invitations to selected gatherings while revealing nothing about their true purpose in London. Her presence in the capital, explained as an attempt to resolve certain financial matters related to her family's estate, raised some eyebrows but created no significant scandal. Those who had once shunned her now merely observed with curious detachment, uncertain how to categorize a traitor's sister who moved, however peripherally, in respectable circles once more. The turning point came in late March. Lord Pembroke was summoned to a closed meeting at the Home Office, not with Blackwell, but with the Home Secretary himself and the Lord Chief Justice. The summons gave no indication whether the meeting represented vindication or censure, leaving him to prepare for either outcome. For 4 hours, Lord Pembroke presented the evidence they had gathered, the journal, the diplomatic discrepancies, the witness statements he had quietly collected, suggesting Thomas Stratford's character was inconsistent with treasonous intent. Throughout, he emphasized the legal principles at stake rather than personal interest in the case, positioning himself as a jurist concerned with proper procedure rather than an advocate for the accused. When the meeting concluded, no immediate decision was announced. Lord Pembroke was instructed to maintain absolute silence regarding the matter while certain inquiries were conducted. The ambiguity left him uncertain whether he had prevailed or merely postponed professional disaster. The answer came a week later in the form of an official communication. Sir Richard Blackwell had been quietly removed from his position pending investigation of administrative irregularities. More significantly, the case against Thomas Stratford was to be formally reviewed by a special committee of the Privy Council, a process that would allow him to return to England under protection while the review proceeded. This carefully worded document represented neither full vindication nor complete victory, but it opened a path toward justice that had previously seemed impossible. Thomas could return from exile, The true architect of treachery faced investigation, and the legal system Lord Pembroke had sworn to uphold had demonstrated, however belatedly, its capacity for self-correction. For Sophia, the news brought overwhelming relief tinged with lingering caution. Years of navigating society had taught her that official positions could change with political winds. Until Thomas stood fully exonerated and Blackwell formally charged, celebration would be premature. What she had not anticipated was Lord Pembroke's next action. Rather than maintaining careful distance now that official processes were in motion, he requested a private meeting with her at Lady Helena's London residence, properly chaperoned but with sufficient privacy for substantive conversation. His purpose proved both professional and deeply personal. The official review would require Thomas's direct testimony, he explained. Arrangements had been made for safe passage from Scotland, but someone would need to meet him at a designated location and explain the complex legal situation before he entered London. That someone needed to be both personally trusted by Thomas and familiar with the case details. In short, he was asking Sophia to undertake a journey to the Scottish border, a journey that would involve considerable discomfort, potential danger if Blackwell had allies seeking to prevent Thomas's return, and certain social risk given the impropriety of a young unmarried woman traveling for such purpose. What remained unspoken but clearly understood was that this request transcended professional necessity. Lord Pembroke was offering Sophia the opportunity to actively participate in her brother's redemption rather than remaining a passive beneficiary of others' efforts. In doing so, he acknowledged her as a partner in their shared pursuit of justice, an acknowledgement that carried implications extending far beyond the immediate case. Sophia's response required no deliberation. The journey would commence within days, with Lady Helena's former companion providing proper chaperonage and Lord Pembroke arranging secure transportation and accommodation through trusted associates. The risks were considerable, but the prospect of reuniting with Thomas and actively contributing to clearing their family name outweighed all concerns. As they finalized arrangements, standing at the proper distance in Lady Helena's elegant drawing room, the air between them held unspoken understanding. Their unlikely alliance, begun through circumstance and developed through shared principle, had evolved into something neither had anticipated when they first met beside that Lincolnshire lake. Lord Pembroke's formal bow as he departed contained more meaning than any flowery declaration could have conveyed. In his carefully controlled expression, Sophia read both admiration for her courage and awareness of how profoundly their fates had become intertwined through this shared pursuit of justice. The sacrifice he had made for principle, risking his carefully built judicial career to challenge a powerful government official, was matched by her willingness to risk her tenuous social rehabilitation by actively participating in her brother's defense. Together, they had demonstrated that true integrity requires more than passive adherence to convention. Sometimes it demands the courage to challenge systems that have failed their own stated principles. As April's first buds appeared in London's parks and squares, both Sophia Stratford and Lord Gabriel Pembroke prepared for journeys that would determine not only Thomas's fate, but their own futures as well. The path ahead remained uncertain, yet for the first time since her brother's disgrace, Sophia faced that uncertainty with something resembling hope, her determination to maintain emotional distance. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Lord Pembroke restored proper formality, explaining that he had felt she deserved to know about these developments before they potentially became public. The case review would proceed slowly and discreetly, but should evidence of her brother's innocence be confirmed, her family's reputation might eventually be restored. As he prepared to take his leave, Lord Pembroke addressed the unspoken tension between them. He had become aware, he said, that certain rumors regarding his motives for extending social connection to her had circulated during the Christmas gathering. With quiet intensity, he assured her that his interest had never been merely strategic or professional. Though propriety prevented him from expressing his feelings more explicitly, he hoped she might judge his character by his actions rather than by malicious gossip. The visit concluded with perfect formality, a proper farewell, a bow over her hand that did not quite touch it, a promise to send word of any developments in the case. Yet as the Pembroke carriage disappeared down the lane, Sophia remained by the window long after it had vanished from sight, her thoughts in turmoil. Lord Pembroke had risked his professional standing to investigate her brother's case, an action that went far beyond official duty or social courtesy. Such sacrifice suggested a depth of feeling that propriety had prevented him from expressing directly. More significantly, it revealed a character of exceptional integrity, willing to challenge authority in pursuit of justice, regardless of personal cost. For the first time since overhearing that painful conversation at the Christmas gathering, Sophia allowed herself to consider that her interpretation might have been mistaken. Perhaps Lord Pembroke's interest in her family's situation had begun as professional concern, but his actions suggested it had evolved into something far more personal and honorable. The following weeks brought a gradual thaw, both in the weather and in Sophia's carefully maintained emotional reserve. When a note arrived from Lady Helena renewing her invitation to visit Pembroke Manor, Sophia accepted with careful courtesy. Mrs. Blackwood's improved health provided a natural reason to resume limited social connections, though both women understood that something more significant had changed. February brought news that the official review of Thomas Stratford's case had been approved, though the process would likely take months. This development reached Sophia through a formal letter from Lord Pembroke, its carefully neutral language appropriate for communication regarding a legal matter. Yet beneath the official information lay an unmistakable message of hope. The first step toward potential vindication had been achieved. A significant turning point came in early March. The annual early spring assembly in the nearby market town represented the most substantial social gathering of the season for the surrounding countryside. When Lady Helena extended an invitation for Mrs. Blackwood and Sophia to accompany the Pembroke party, acceptance represented a bold step back into public society. The assembly rooms were modestly elegant, filled with the leading families of the area, along with numerous military officers from the nearby garrison. Sophia entered on Lady Helena's arm, her simple white muslin gown adorned only with a ribbon that matched her lavender eyes. The initial reaction to her appearance included several raised eyebrows and whispered comments, but Lady Helena's obvious sponsorship prevented any direct cuts. Lord Pembroke greeted them with formal courtesy, his position as the most prominent gentleman present ensuring that his behavior would set the tone for others. When he requested Sophia's hand for the second set of dances, a country dance that allowed limited conversation, the gesture publicly confirmed his approval of her presence. As they moved through the figures of the dance, maintaining proper distance while occasionally joining hands as required, Lord Pembroke spoke quietly of developments in her brother's case. New evidence had emerged, suggesting document forgery at high levels. Though he could share no specifics, his expression conveyed cautious optimism. More striking than this news was the evident concern in his manner, not for the case itself, but for how these revelations might affect her. Did she have support should the situation become public? Would Mrs. Blackwood stand by her if controversy erupted anew? His questions revealed consideration for her personal welfare that transcended professional interest. Sophia assured him that she was prepared for whatever might come. Though she longed to express her growing admiration for his courage in pursuing justice at personal risk, the public setting allowed no such intimate conversation. Instead, she conveyed her feelings through her eyes and in the slight pressure of her gloved hand against his during the brief moments the dance brought them together. As the evening concluded, an unexpected encounter nearly shattered the fragile peace Sophia had begun to reclaim. A newly arrived military officer, overhearing her name, made a cutting remark about traitor's blood, just loudly enough to reach nearby ears. The deliberate insult created an immediate silence in their corner of the room. Before Sophia could respond, Lord Pembroke was at her side, his expression coldly formal as he addressed the officer. Without raising his voice or making a scene, he delivered a rebuke so precisely worded and delivered with such quiet authority that the younger man blanched visibly. The exchange ended with the officer offering a stiff apology before withdrawing in evident discomfort. The incident lasted less than a minute, yet its impact resonated deeply. Lord Pembroke had publicly defended Sophia's honor in a manner that associated himself with her cause. For a man in his position, such an action carried significant social and potentially professional risk. The carriage ride back to Thornfield Cottage passed in thoughtful silence. Lady Helena had tactfully engaged Mrs. Blackwood in conversation about a new novel, allowing Sophia a moment of privacy with her thoughts. The evening had revealed not only progress in her brother's case, but more significantly, the depth of Lord Pembroke's commitment to both justice and to her personally. As spring advanced across Lincolnshire, bringing new life to gardens and hedgerows, Sophia found herself cautiously nurturing similar renewal in her heart. The possibility that her brother might be vindicated offered hope for eventual restoration of her family name. Yet increasingly, her thoughts turned not to London society and what might have been, but to the present, to quiet afternoons in the Pembroke Library discussing literature, to Lady Helena's warm friendship, and most of all, to moments when Lord Pembroke's carefully maintained reserve softened into something warmer when their eyes met. Such was the way of hearts in those days, constrained by propriety, yet finding pathways to connection through shared values and unspoken understanding. For Sophia Stratford and Lord Gabriel Pembroke, the journey from formal acquaintance to deeper attachment had traversed unusual terrain, through scandal, misunderstanding, and the complex landscape of justice and mercy. April arrived with its characteristic mixture of sunshine and showers, painting the countryside in vibrant greens and delicate blossoms. For Sophia, the changing season mirrored the transformation in her own circumstances. The journey to Scotland's border to meet Thomas had been arranged with remarkable efficiency, Lady Helena's former companion, Mrs. Winters, providing proper chaperonage, while Lord Pembroke's trusted associates ensured their safety at each stage. The small coaching inn where Thomas awaited them stood in a remote valley, deliberately chosen for its isolation. When Sophia first glimpsed her brother after nearly a year's separation, the changes in him were immediately apparent. The carefree young diplomat had been replaced by a man of greater gravity, his features sharpened by months of vigilance and uncertainty. Yet his embrace contained the same warmth she remembered, his eyes lighting with familiar affection as he beheld his sister. Their reunion, though joyful, allowed little time for reminiscence. Sophia immediately shared the complex legal developments, Blackwell's removal from office, the special committee established to review his case, and the protective arrangements for his return to London. Thomas listened with growing amazement as she detailed her collaboration with Lord Pembroke, her discovery of crucial evidence in his letters, and their daring retrieval of his hidden journal. Most striking to Thomas was the transformation in his once sheltered sister. The young woman who had previously defined herself primarily through social propriety now spoke with confidence about legal strategies and evidence authentication. Her understanding of the case matched his own, her questions revealing analytical thinking he had never before witnessed in her. When Thomas expressed wonder at her courage in undertaking such an active role, Sophia's response was quietly profound. The past year had taught her that true character revealed itself not through social standing, but through choices made when justice and comfort stood opposed. In Lord Pembroke, she had found someone whose commitment to principle transcended convention. His example had inspired her to reclaim agency, rather than merely accepting fate's decree. The journey back to London proceeded without incident, though not without tension. At each coaching stop, Sophia scanned fellow travelers for any sign of Blackwell's associates. Thomas traveled under assumed identity with papers provided through Lord Pembroke's connections. Yet discovery remained a constant risk until they reached the capital and the protection of official sanctuary. Lord Pembroke himself met their carriage at a designated location on London's outskirts, his presence providing both legal authority and personal reassurance as they completed the final stage to secure accommodations arranged through the Lord Chief Justice's office. The moment of his first meeting with Thomas carried particular weight. The King's Justice face to face with the man whose case had led him to question the very system he served. What might have been awkward instead revealed immediate mutual respect. Thomas's gratitude for Lord Pembroke's extraordinary efforts was matched by his lordship's clear admiration for the younger man's courage in documenting corruption at significant personal risk. Between them stood Sophia, the unexpected catalyst who had transformed legal principle into personal commitment for Lord Pembroke, and inspired her brother's trust in a system he had come to fear. The days that followed brought intense activity. Thomas's testimony before the special committee required extensive preparation, with Lord Pembroke providing invaluable guidance on legal protocols and potential challenges. Sophia's role proved surprisingly central. Her methodical organization of evidence from Thomas's journal, letters, and Lord Pembroke's document collection created a chronology so compelling that even skeptical committee members found it difficult to dismiss. Most crucial was her identification of a pattern invisible to those who had viewed the evidence in isolation. By aligning Thomas's journal entries with specific diplomatic communications and Blackwell's subsequent advancement, she established a timeline that revealed clear correlation between altered documents, benefits to French interests, and Blackwell's career progression. The committee's deliberations extended over 2 weeks, during which Sophia divided her time between supporting Thomas's testimony preparations and maintaining necessary social appearances through Lady Helena's careful sponsorship. London society, always attuned to shifts in official favor, noted the Stratford case's reopening with considerable speculation. Sophia's precise position in this developing narrative remained ambiguous enough to keep even the most determined gossips uncertain whether to shun or cautiously acknowledge her. Throughout this period, Lord Pembroke maintained perfect propriety in his interactions with both Stratfords, his official involvement providing legitimate reason for regular consultation while never overstepping boundaries that might compromise either Thomas's case or Sophia's reputation. Yet in those consultations, the connection between him and Sophia deepened through shared purpose and mutual respect that transcended conventional courtship. The turning point came in late April. The special committee's preliminary findings were delivered privately to the Home Secretary and Lord Chief Justice, with Lord Pembroke summoned to receive their conclusions before formal announcement. For hours after his departure for this crucial meeting, Sophia and Thomas waited in tense silence in their temporary lodgings, both aware that their futures hung on decisions being made in government offices across the city. When Lord Pembroke finally arrived that evening, his expression as he entered their small sitting room told the story before he spoke. The committee had found sufficient evidence to completely exonerate Thomas Stratford of all charges of treason. Furthermore, Sir Richard Blackwell had been taken into custody pending formal charges of espionage, evidence tampering, and misuse of office. Thomas would be publicly cleared through an unprecedented official statement acknowledging the miscarriage of justice. The Stratford properties would be restored, along with compensation for financial losses sustained during his exile. Most significantly, his professional reputation would be rehabilitated, with the Foreign Office offering reinstatement at a rank commensurate with his experience. The magnitude of this vindication left both Stratfords momentarily speechless. After months of living under scandal's shadow, the prospect of complete restoration seemed almost incomprehensible. For Thomas, the acknowledgement of his innocence represented professional redemption and the chance to rebuild his life in England. For Sophia, it meant liberation from the social purgatory that had defined her existence since her brother's disgrace. Yet as the implications settled, Sophia found herself contemplating this victory with unexpected complexity. Complete rehabilitation meant the option of returning to her former life, London seasons, social obligations, the pursuit of an advantageous match. She could reclaim everything that scandal had taken from her. The realization that she no longer desired that life came as quiet epiphany. The young woman who had valued social approval above all else had been transformed through adversity into someone who measured worth by different standards: integrity, courage, and principle, rather than position or appearance. The society that had once represented her entire world now seemed limited in its understanding of true character. This shift in perspective inevitably affected her view of Lord Pembroke. Their connection, forged through extraordinary circumstances, had evolved into something deeper than conventional attachment. In him, she had found not merely a benefactor or advocate, but a partner whose values aligned with the person she had become, rather than the young woman society had expected her to be. For his part, Lord Pembroke faced his own reconsideration. The successful resolution of the Stratford case had enhanced rather than damaged his professional standing. with the Lord Chief Justice privately commending his persistence in pursuing justice despite institutional resistance. His judicial career, potentially at risk months earlier, now offered even greater opportunities for advancement. Yet professional success felt hollow compared to the more personal satisfaction of having helped restore justice to a family unjustly condemned. More significant still was his growing certainty that his connection with Sophia Stratford represented something essential to his future happiness, a partnership based on shared values and mutual understanding rather than mere social compatibility. The opportunity to express these feelings came unexpectedly during a small gathering at Lady Helena's London residence, organized to celebrate Thomas's exoneration following the official announcement. The select guests included only those who had shown kindness to Sophia during her period of disgrace, or who had assisted in some way with Thomas's case. As the evening progressed, Lord Pembroke found a moment to speak privately with Sophia in Lady Helena's conservatory, a space visible enough to maintain propriety while offering relative privacy for conversation. With characteristic directness, he acknowledged how their extraordinary shared experience had revealed compatibility that conventional courtship might never have discovered. His admiration had begun, he explained, with respect for her dignity in adversity. That respect had deepened through observation of her character, her courage in actively pursuing justice rather than merely enduring injustice, and her willingness to challenge convention when principle required it. What had started as professional concern for justice had transformed into the deepest personal attachment he had ever experienced. The social distance between them, once so formidable when combined with her brother's alleged crimes, now seemed insignificant compared to the profound connection they had formed through shared values and mutual understanding. If she could consider a future together, not as participants in a conventional marriage of appropriate social equals, but as partners bound by deeper compatibility, he would count himself the most fortunate of men. Sophia's response required no elaborate declaration. Their journey from adversity to vindication had taught her to value substance over appearance, to recognize true worth in both herself and others. In Lord Pembroke, she had found not merely a champion of justice, but a man whose integrity, compassion, and quiet strength complemented her newly discovered resilience and purpose. Their understanding, reached amid blooming spring flowers with the proper distance still maintained between them, represented not an ending but a beginning. Society would require appropriate periods of formal courtship, family approvals, and all the usual proprieties. Yet the essential truth had been acknowledged by both. Their paths, so improbably crossed through scandal and justice, had converged permanently through deeper understanding and genuine affection. By midsummer, Pembroke Manor hosted a different kind of gathering. The formal announcement of Lord Gabriel Pembroke's engagement to Miss Sophia Stratford united families once separated by suspicion and legal proceedings. Thomas Stratford, his position in society fully restored and his diplomatic career advancing with renewed vigor, gave his blessing with evident satisfaction, recognizing in Lord Pembroke a brother-in-law of exceptional character. The guest list reflected Sophia's transformed priorities. Those who had shown kindness during her exile received prominence over those whose social standing might once have seemed essential. Mrs. Blackwood occupied a position of honor, her early compassion remembered with genuine gratitude. Several neighbors from Thornfield Village who had maintained connection despite scandal found themselves mingling with London's legal and diplomatic elite, a social integration that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. For Sophia, the journey from disgrace to happiness had revealed unexpected truths. The scandal that had once seemed to destroy her future had ultimately led her to a deeper understanding of herself and to a love based on genuine knowledge of character rather than social convenience. Her active participation in clearing her brother's name had transformed her from passive victim of circumstance to architect of justice, a transformation reflected in the confident young woman who now moved through society on her own terms rather than bound by its expectations. Lord Pembroke's willingness to risk his position for justice had demonstrated a nobility beyond mere title or inheritance. More significant was his recognition of Sophia as a partner in that pursuit, his respect for her insights and courage reflecting a view of women rarely found among men of his position. Their unusual courtship, conducted through shared investigation rather than ballroom encounters, had established a foundation of mutual respect that conventional relationships seldom achieved. As they stood together receiving congratulations from assembled guests, the contrast with her arrival in Lincolnshire less than a year earlier could not have been more pronounced. Then she had been merely a trader's sister, seeking anonymity in exile. Now she prepared to become Lady Pembroke, her future secured not through social rehabilitation, but through the mutual recognition of true worth between two people tested by adversity. Thomas, observing his sister's quiet confidence as she stood beside Lord Pembroke, reflected on how thoroughly circumstance had revealed character that might otherwise have remained dormant. The carefully proper young woman who had once defined herself through social acceptance had discovered deeper strength when that acceptance was withdrawn. In losing everything external, she had found internal resources that transformed loss into unexpected gain. For Lord Pembroke, the journey had been equally transformative. The jurist committed to abstract principles of law had discovered that justice sometimes requires challenging the very systems designed to uphold it. In Sophia, he had found someone who understood that commitment, who had demonstrated through her own actions that principle mattered more than comfort or convention. As summer twilight settled over Pembroke Manor's gardens, the gathering gradually dispersed into smaller groups enjoying the evening's beauty. Sophia and Lord Pembroke found a moment of relative privacy on the terrace, the proper distance between them maintained for propriety, yet their conversation reflecting the deeper intimacy of shared experience. The future stretching before them promised both conventional happiness and unique partnership. Society would see merely another advantageous match between compatible families, unaware of the extraordinary circumstances that had forged their connection. Yet they would carry forward the knowledge that their union rested on foundations tested by adversity and strengthened through shared purpose rather than mere social convenience. As moonlight silvered the landscape beyond the terrace, they spoke not of the past's trials, but of possibilities ahead, of justice yet to be pursued, of principles to be upheld in both public service and private life, of creating a home where truth and integrity mattered more than appearance or advantage. In these shared aspirations lay the true romance of their connection, a meeting of minds and hearts that transcended convention while honoring its forms. And so another tale of hearts united reaches its blessed conclusion. Love, it seems, finds a way even through the strictest conventions of proper society, sometimes revealing its truest form precisely when those conventions have been most severely tested.